Hey everyone, and welcome to Risky Business. My name's Patrick Gray. Fantastic show for you this week. An excellent selection of news to get through with Adam Boileau and James WIlson, and we'll be doing that in just a moment. And then we'll be hearing from this week's sponsor, Prowler. So Prowler is an open source project that does cloud security checks and remediations. And its founder, Tony De La Fuente, will be joining me later on in this week's sponsor interview. So, of course, there is the open source Prowler, but they're kind of at the point where they're starting to add some enterprise features into the commercial version. It's much as you would sort of expect, pointy, clicky SSO integration and, compliance features and stuff that really doesn't belong in a community/open source version of software like that. So Tony will be joining us to have a bit of a chat about that later on in this week's episode. But first up, let's get into the news. And we got to start this week by kind of correcting some stuff that I said last week. So last week I said it was my very firmly held belief that Trenchant, L3 Harris Trenchant, was the vendor behind what became known as the Triangulation campaign, right? Which was targeting Russia. It was disclosed by Kaspersky in late 2023. So last week I said a few things. I said I thought that the newly unveiled Coruna exploit toolkit was linked to Triangulation. And I said this for a few reasons, basically because it was sort of, it seemed to be implied a little bit in Google's write-up of it. iVerify came out and sort of made that link. And I'd already sort of long suspected that Triangulation was an L3 Harris Trenchant thing. Turns out it's not, right? So turns out it's actually not. But interestingly enough, the bit that I did get right last week is that the Coruna stuff is the Trenchant stuff, presumably leaked by Peter Williams. Now, we don't know that that's the stuff that he leaked, but we do know that these were a series of exploit chains that were being used at L3 Harris or developed by L3 Harris around about that time. So you would think, logically speaking, that these are the exploits that were leaked. There's some dead giveaways there. I think the fact that they've got like bits of this are named like cassowary, which is a dangerous flightless Australian bird, would tend to indicate that maybe this is a Trenchant product. I should also mention too that I do have some sourcing on this. This isn't just vibes at this point. Last week was a little bit too much vibes, maybe, but this week not so much vibes. So TLDR, Triangulation and Coruna, not from the same vendor, did use one of the same bugs though, and I'm really unclear on whether or not that was parallel discovery or someone licensed the bug to someone else to use, or maybe someone used to work at place A and moved to place B and sort of took the bug with them, or I don't even know how that happened, but we can say they were using some of the same exploits. Could have been parallel discovery, not sure. Triangulation was not Trenchant, Coruna was. That's about as cleared up as it's going to get. Adam, let's bring you in on this one. For starters, the other thing that's happened here, of course, is that we actually have the Coruna samples on GitHub thanks to the team at iVerify. Thanks for that, which meant we've all got to look at them.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting, seeing the inside of that particular kit. I mean, we've seen bits and pieces. That particular, the bug that you mentioned that's shared between Coruna and Triangulation was that undocumented Apple hardware feature that basically turns into unconstrained DMA. That was a super juicy bug. And so seeing the insides of the rest of the tool chain that was kind of around that, because when we saw, I think it was Kaspersky wrote up that particular one, we were there was some eyeball face going on there because it was so interesting. And so seeing the rest of the tool chain, it's kind of gratifying to see what the high end of the market looks like. And, many people have seen little bits and pieces, but seeing the whole chain laid out and just how, I guess there's a reason that, Trenchant and, Azimuth and LPL before them, were very well regarded in the industry because they produced some good stuff, it turns out. And yeah, it's nice to see. It's good to see the write-ups. James has been digging through it and some details in his background at Apple as well. And so, yeah, it's just been a fun week around the office, seeing these beautiful, exquisitely classed Fabergé egg, exploits.
Yeah, I mean, this explains why Trenchant guys had the good parties in Vegas, I guess. This is why they get the big bucks, right? Is because it turns out they're pretty good at this. So yeah, let's bring in James at this because the obvious thing is, geez, if only we knew someone who used to work at Apple on iOS who might be able to have some insights here into what these exploits looked at. And James, you have spent some time actually over your weekend too, like, because this is such a rare event, really having a look through these samples, and you have been, I mean, to say you're impressed is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, that is understatement of the century. Like, it's such a weird feeling to be looking at exploit code that is exploiting code that was written by folks that just used to work in the building next to you at Infinite Loop, and then when you see the way this has been strung together, just using the most seemingly unrelated parts of even just the JavaScript frameworks, like the number format object in the internationalization framework being combined with an offline audio context that had a buffer overflow in it, being then combined with vector graphics. It's like no one would have ever thought to put these three things together. But the sheer depth of knowledge of the internals of how this works is just, I was looking at it from the lens of, okay, people are saying this is nation state and sophisticated, but what does that actually mean? And gosh, you really do see what that means when you log.
Yeah, you're probably piling into this thing saying, yeah, sure, buddy, whatever. Yeah, okay, yeah. Come on, click. And then you're like, oh my God.
Yes, yeah.
Now, I should mention too, for those who are really, really interested in James's opinion on this toolkit, you have recorded an 80-minute solo podcast just talking through your analysis of this exploit toolkit, and we're going to publish that, I think, either today or tomorrow. But it's going out real soon. So if anyone out there listening to this is interested, and like, God help me, I never thought something like that would be interesting, but I've listened to about half of an hour of it as of yesterday, and it's really good. So well done. But those who are interested in listening to that, you can find it at the Risky Business Features podcast. So just search for Risky Business Features in your podcatcher or head to risky.biz. Scroll, you'll find it with all of the right subscriber links there. But look, I think it's safe to say that this stuff is very well done. And look, staying on that topic, we had a guy, Daniel Wade, publish a analysis of the JavaScript components of this, which was really interesting because like everybody was focused on the sort of payloads and whatever. And it looks clear too that these toolkits went from being used presumably by the US. Google say this, and they're a bit cagey about where they saw it pop up. Then all of a sudden it's being used by the Russians to target Ukrainians, and now it's being used to try to steal cryptocurrency from Chinese-speaking users, which is just like, what a waste of some exquisite exploits. But where was I going with that? Oh yes, the JavaScript. So everyone's been looking at the samples and the the actual exploit components of this. This guy sat down, really had a look at the JS components. James, what did you think of that part of all of this?
Yeah, it's an incredibly in-depth analysis, and I think the thing to really call out here is the analysis that Wade did. He was the only one, I think, between Google and iVerify that were the other sources to actually call out the use of or explain how the pack bypass works, right? So in all Apple A series silicon, since I think the A12 onwards, there's a built-in hardware feature that looks at the pages in memory before code is run, and it checks that there is actually a cryptographic hash and signature there before it'll run code for obviously ensuring the integrity of the code. Google and iVerify called out that this had obviously been bypassed, but just called it, I think they referred to it as like an undocumented or not public bypass. But he went through and figured out how it works, and the way it works is, again, just it's beautiful. It's signed code being used to sign other unsigned code, and it's magic.
Adam, you got some thoughts there?
Yeah, no, it is. It's just beautiful work, and you can listen to James's pod and you'll hear the specifics of all the details. But really, it's just like, I've met some of the guys that work in places like Trenchant, and some days you see them at the end of the day and they're at the pub having a beer or whatever, and they've got that just like, there's a certain look, like glassy look in your eye when you've spent your entire day inside the gubbins of, symbol linking in the middle of someone else's operating system. And it's just, I have a lot of sympathy for what that does to your brain. So like, I salute you, sirs, for your very fine work, but god damn, it's cool. And it's just, it's great to see it torn down and written up so that we can all enjoy it.
Now, I will just say, too, further on the triangulation, misattribution there, I'm not the only one who thought this, right? So as evidenced by iVerify, who had the samples and looked at it, getting feelings in their waters that these things were connected. I mean, you had L3 Harris Trenchant guys passing around stickers at conferences that were triangles saying "caught in the wild." You know what I mean? And also, I've heard from some people that certain elements of Trenchant management weren't really keen to shut down the rumor, because it was kind of like a positive rumor to have that you were behind this like really badass set of exploits or whatever. So look, I'm not the only one who's made that mistake and formed that opinion in error. But I think it's really cool that like we're kind of at the point where I feel like this mystery is largely solved. Lorenzo over at TechCrunch too, overnight, he posted a piece too that linked the Coruna stuff to Trenchant. So I think we can kind of put that to bed. Who was behind Triangulation? I don't know. It's another Five Eyes actor. Was it a contractor that wrote it? Was it NSA? I don't know. But I still think Kaspersky's story that a Five Eyes threat actor was exploiting the telephones of people who worked at Kaspersky in threat research seems like a pretty unlikely one. I think if I had some closely guarded exploits, I'm not going to throw them against threat researchers. That's just me. I'm like, hey, I've got tens of millions of dollars of ODA here. Let's go exploit some people who work at Mandiant. Like, that just doesn't track. You know what I mean, Adam?
Yeah, like it feels like a poor choice unless you have some very specific tasking or reason that you need specifically them. But like that just feels very niche, and it seems like a poor life choice. And
they were hacking ambassadors and stuff, and people in the government. Oh, and a handful of Kaspersky researchers. Yeah. Like, give me a break. No, that's not what happened. Now, anyway, we're going from the exquisite end of the of the exploit and malware industry, down to the kind of like rundown, crappy rats everywhere. And we've got this great post here from Bitdefender talking about APT36, which is apparently a Pakistan-based threat actor, which is now just they're doing Vibe-coded malware, which Bitdefender is calling Vibeware. I love it, personally. James, you've had a bit of a look at this, and you also think Iran might be doing some stuff around Vibeware and whatnot. But I mean, this is how it's done. It's kind of depressing. What do you make of all of this? What do you make of this APT36 and how they're rolling?
Yeah, there was two funny call-outs in that article. The first one was, a Go binary that they observed that still had a template address in there for the C2, and so it got deployed and it couldn't actually reach back to its C2. And I think that only could have been better if the C2 address was actually still localhost, so the developer could have legitimately said, "But it worked on my machine." But the other interesting thing here is, they're adopting novel languages or niche languages like Zig and Crystal and Nim, and like that's real new hotness stuff. And some of the articles say, that's going to help evade detection, and I'm not really sure that's the case. But I would bet that it's just because given free rein, an LLM is probably more inclined to go and churn out a new language that it has a fresh and pretty deep set of knowledge around to create these exploits.
I mean, this is a trend. Sorry, Adam, but this is a bit of a trend because we saw something where there was like Go malware for some like ancient platform recently, when we're both scratching our heads going, But probably LLMs being everywhere and doing so much code is a part of that. But you were going to jump in there, Adam, with something.
Yeah, part of the write-up is suggesting that maybe they're doing this for detection evasion, right? Like you build custom malware. That way you don't have to worry about signatures existing for your malware. You can avoid AV and other things. But the idea that you would need to go to the extent of, like writing a malware in one place and then having LLMs translate it into other implementations so that they can avoid detection. It's like avoiding AV really isn't that difficult. Like there's like the state of the art for avoiding AV is already, good enough to get past most people's AV. It seems unnecessary. Maybe there's some other explanation, like maybe it's just fun, maybe it's different, I don't know. But like the detection evasion angle just didn't track exactly like what's going on to me, but hey, who knows?
Now, we've also got this other story here about some state-linked actors, Iranian state-linked actors targeting US networks and whatnot in the lead up to the Iran war. James, you felt this one dovetails actually previously quite nicely with the APT36 one. Why is that?
Yeah, I didn't make that connection at all until I read the write-up, and they talked about they're using Dino, which is a very new, again, with the theme of the new hotness, a very new Node.js replacement, like a JavaScript runtime. Then it's like, if you know what Dino is, you know that it's basically a runtime that was designed for security built in, and it explicitly does not allow access to network and disk and all the things that you would want a backdoor to have. So it's just these weird technology choices. As Adam said, if you're just trying to get a different hash for your malware, why are you bothering? But then we're seeing LLMs choose brand new languages and brand new runtimes, and those runtimes don't even fit the model of what you would want your implant to be doing. It's right.
So you see this one as a bizarre technology choice on behalf of the Iranian APT operators, which would suggest that maybe they're using LLMs to do some of their dirty work.
Well, I'd scratch my head, but the lack of hair just makes that dangerous.
Now, look, staying on all things Iran, we have a story here. It's been repeated in a bunch of outlets, but we've linked through to the SC Media version of this story that Iran's cyber warfare HQ on a base somewhere was actually hit with an airstrike or a missile. It has been blown up by the Israelis. No surprises there. I remember reporting on when the Israelis hit a Hamas cyber facility in Gaza, actually many years ago, before all of this, before the war in Gaza. It was just so massively controversial. In that case, the building had been evacuated prior because there had been prior notice given. So no one was actually killed in the strike. But, I think a lot of people in this field sort of forget that people who are doing state-backed cyber operations, quite often they're gathering intelligence that is going to be used to harm their enemies. So they are legitimate targets. And I just I haven't seen as much of that discourse this time around. So I think maybe people have adjusted to that. But did you reflect on that a bit as well, Adam?
Yeah, exactly. The increasing, I guess, the utility of cyber. We talked, was it last week before, about where there are places that cyber is actually legitimately useful, and battle damage assessment, reconnaissance, things that are legitimately military functions. If you start doing those, then you do end up being kind of legitimate targets. And I think that I remember that one against Hamas, and we talked at the time about how this is also a deterrent for wanting to go and use your cyber skills, in that kind of capacity. Maybe think twice, go do some other business. Same kind of thing here, where, even if the effect of blowing this up is not, in terms of ongoing operations and those particular staff, even if that wasn't a big impact, it just has that kind of reminder, you are a legitimate kinetic target if you're doing this, in an adversarial context, in the war, and, think about what you're doing.
Yes. You're part of it, I think, is the message there. If you're gathering intel. I think that's what makes OPSEC so important. I think it was really funny, actually, when the United States started to sort of dox some of these Chinese operators, right? Whether that was DOGE or whoever is all of the attribution stuff. And then the Chinese are like, yeah, we're going to do the same thing. And they do stuff by saying, Rob Joyce is NSA. And it's yeah, man, he's been on my podcast as NSA. Great collection there. So I think, this is where OPSEC as well becomes pretty important to the whole enterprise. And I think that's something Five Eyes certainly does better than the rest of them. Anyway, moving on, and two of these, at the time of this article was written, 6 US service members had been killed in this Iran war. I think that's risen to 7 now. 2 of them were actually cybersecurity people. There was a guy who was studying cybersecurity at a university, and a guy who was actually doing cyber stuff, defensive cyber stuff in the US military. They were both killed in a strike in Kuwait. So there you go. It's very sad. I don't think these guys chose to engage in a missile war with Iran that didn't have clear aims, and they've paid the ultimate price for that.
Yeah, and these are reservists. So these are people that had regular civilian lives and had been deployed, as reservists. And that's, it's a pretty long road from Iowa to, where they were in some, place in Kuwait, and expecting to be on the end of a missile strike. Not really probably what they expected when they signed up for the reserves,
Yeah, I don't quite understand what all of this is for. I understand that Iran's missile launch capabilities will be temporarily degraded. Maybe their drone manufacturing temporarily degraded. We haven't seen really a change of regime, or if anything, we're going to wind up with a more hardline regime. I don't know what this is for. And tragically, those dead schoolgirls, mate, that's just I've got a daughter that age, and seeing that something like 170 kids were killed. And, the reporting suggests that one of the reasons that strike may have happened is because Claude was used for target selection and to accelerate target selection. You just think, wow, if that is the case, if there were insufficient checks done, I mean, what a tragedy. The whole thing is just tragic. Anyway, moving on, and, sort of staying with cyber and conflict, the Russians are doing a big Signal and WhatsApp phishing push. Is this just more QR code linking, James, or is there something interesting happening here?
No, I didn't see anything particularly novel other than just the sheer volume of it and the brashness of who it's targeting. It's just same old, and even sort of Signal's advice it almost reads like tired advice of like, okay, come on, this is happening, you know what you got to do, but you're still falling for it. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is, a pretty well-known problem. But on the other hand, like, there is not that much attack surface here, right? I mean, your options for phishing Signal users to get some useful effect are pretty limited. And, I don't know what the Signal Foundation should do to, kind of make that device pairing process more robust. But I think, there is some... it's somewhat heartening that there is so little attack surface here. And, all they have to do is figure out, hey, is there a more robust way we can do this? And they're going to shut off, one of the only significant avenues people have for doing this kind of thing. So, whilst we don't have a support bot on Signal that's going to message you, advice does, you can feel the like exasperation, like them rubbing their temples over at Signal Foundation. But, they have an opportunity to figure out, really answer one question. How do we do this better? And they'll make a big difference. So that's good.
Yep. Okay. All right. Oh, now this next story. Now, this is completely unverified. It's been pulled off like some Russian telegram. I reckon there's a 50% chance that this is just completely made up by some Russian mill blogger. But I want to talk about it anyway, because it's one of those things that like is... I don't know. It could be true. I don't know.
It vibes right for us.
It vibes right? Which is that the Russians have been initially we're trying to tell troops and trying to tell Russians generally not to use Telegram because it's not safe. After a while, and that's where this is, from what I heard, like this kind of feels like it's probably wrong. But after a while they said, look, people on the front can keep using Telegram, because it turned out Telegram was being used a lot by Russians who were involved in the war in the Ukraine, in Ukraine. I'm sorry. So there's that part of it. But now this report from Russian Telegram says that they told them to stop using Telegram and to start using Max. And this is their everything app. This is the Russian WeChat, basically. So they're like, start using Max. And now the latest info is... and that's what this thing is claiming, is that the Russian government is now saying, oh my God, don't use Max. It's completely insecure. People are dying because they're using Max. Go back to using Telegram. So look, I don't know that this is true, but what I do know is that it's extremely highly plausible, because if I'm Ukrainian right now, if I'm working in Ukrainian SIGINT, this is absolutely what I'm doing, is I'm trying to figure out Max, right?
Yeah, I mean, Max is a pretty natural target for them. And of course, this is one of the challenges of building your own sovereign infrastructure, your sovereign technology stack, whatever else. Like, this is hard work. Like, it takes a while to get right. And even if Max turns out to be as good as Signal or as good as, other alternatives, it's going to take time. Like the first versions, first couple of years, much like when you roll your own crypto, everyone who tries to implement their own X509 parsing is going to, screw it up the first 11 times they do it. The same thing here, right? I mean, trying to implement your own messenger and trying to do so in wartime conditions against an adversary that is in an existential fight against you. Yeah, that's not the place that you want to be YOLOing your first take at a national messenger. So yeah, it's going to be a fun ride for, I imagine the Ukrainians must be having a hell of a time discovering it, figuring out all the ways to break it and then abuse it. And then, yeah, if this report of Russian troops being told to just go back to Telegram is true, then yeah, doesn't look great for the rest of the Russians who are stuck having to use Max.
Well, it is kind of funny because it is the app that the Russian government has made to make it easier to surveil their own people, which ironically makes it easier for their enemies to surveil their people if they find the bugs in the thing. So, anyway, I don't know. As I say, that's completely unverified, but a fun one to talk about. Anyway, Now, speaking of technology engineered to surveil people, the FBI is investigating another breach on its so-called critical surveillance network. That's what CNN has called it in this instance. Now, we have seen a breach of surveillance-associated systems in the past. Recently in the last couple of years, this happened, and it was the Chinese, but they didn't actually get to the wiretap systems. What they did get to were the systems that were like processing the warrants. And this is extremely valuable intelligence because it would tell them like, oh, okay, the Americans are onto this guy who we've been using to do X, Y, Z. So we're going to just have to like walk away from that asset and that sort of stuff, right? So this is very valuable. But in this case, we don't really know exactly what data the attackers have got. It's all very cagey. I mean, usually in America, like eventually they're pretty forthcoming about stuff like this that's gone wrong. But James, you've looked into this as well as us, and there's like not really much on this out there.
No, there is hardly anything. So it's a lot of speculation. I sort of broke it down into like an input, process, output framework, and maybe it is the input, it's the tasking, could be. It doesn't feel like it's the process of actually wiretapping. That would not be in these networks that are supposedly seeing suspicious activity. That I believe would be in the telcos. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is also the angle of what if it is like the repository of the recordings or the transcripts or something like that. We don't know. It's so short on anything substantial.
Yeah, but they seem freaked out, which is never good, right, when you're dealing with news like this.
Yeah, and we're also not clear what the link, if any, with Salt Typhoon is, right? How does this fit into that? Because, we saw reporting of the Chinese intruding into telco LI systems there, but we also didn't really have any details. And part of this, as you say, is that people are just kind of cagey around lawful intercept and the actual mechanics of it. There's quite a lot of moving parts. I mean, it could even be something as like, you've got recordings, but you need a linguist to process them. So maybe there's, because it's not necessarily in English, there's lots of places where the downstream products are processed. And so we don't even really know. As you say, eventually maybe the US, will explain it. It's funny seeing, the other countries in the world that have also been Salt Typhoon, how much slower they are at getting out details of what happened to them than the US. And so we complain about the lack of transparency here and how long, how imprecise the language is. But, we don't hear this coming out of, other countries that were Salt Typhooned, in anything, even this little bit of detail,
Yeah, I mean, it is funny. Like, for all we say about the Americans, they are pretty transparent when it comes to this stuff in a way that is like just would never happen here, right? So, like, if this were happening in Australia, it would be buried. Like, we ain't hearing about it unless somebody blows the whistle and tips off a member of the opposition who brings it up in some Senate committee or something. Like, that's how it would get out, and it would be a scandal, right? Whereas this is just, normal day of the week sort of stuff in America. Now, look, speaking of normal stuff in America, the Trump White House has released its cybersecurity strategy. Now, if you remove the logo pages and the preamble and the last page, which is just a blue sheet with the White House logo on it, you get a total of 4 pages for this cybersecurity strategy. And it reads like this is the most bizarre thing I've seen in what's supposed to be a serious public policy document, because it reads like cybersecurity fan fiction. We are going to secure our networks and upgrade them and they'll be the best in the world. We're going to do this. We're going to go after the adversaries and, completely render them helpless, flailing children, It's bizarre. Our colleague Catalin Kimpanu did a write-up of this in the Risky Bullet newsletter, which is hilarious. It's quite long and it's funny because he actually cut it back.
Himself.
He couldn't, right? And I spoke to him about it. He's like, yeah, originally it was longer and he cut it back. And it's like, it's still actually pretty beefy for a lead item in a Risky Business newsletter story. But it's like, the whole thing is just bizarre. It's so weird. Like Tom Uren, our colleague, he's writing up a more serious analysis of this tomorrow for the Seriously Risky Business newsletter. Again, go to risky.biz to subscribe to that. And it's his feeling that some of the parts of it where they're going to go offensive and take more offensive actions against adversaries, he thinks that is a part of the strategy that actually has some hope of going somewhere. The rest of it just seems pretty meaningless. And my question is, given the other actions of the United States right now when it comes to, offensive actions, whether we're talking about Venezuela or what's happening in Iran, you sort of wonder if they're about to go on the cyber equivalent of a kill streak with no sort of deeper strategy beyond that, right? And I just don't know what's going to happen. Like, let's start with you, James. What are your, I mean, first of all, what did you think of this, the strategy, which we'll put in quotes? And second of all, like, you know, what
as you guys know, I've had the pleasure of working in some very large enterprises over the last couple of years, places that have like entire departments that are called strategy and transformation, and they churn out just the most dry, hard to read things. And like, I spent years training myself how to read those. I couldn't get through this document. I couldn't. I kept putting it down. I kept coming back to it. I kept thinking, I've got to read this thing. But you know, it does, ironically, coming back to AI here, it almost, you know, in a super cynical sense, feels like someone said, okay, what's the real executive order? We just want to go and wreck a bunch of stuff in cyberspace. Okay, but we can't just say that. So can you please create me a doc that looks really balanced and talks about all these other things we're going to do, but what we're really going to do is go and break a bunch of stuff in cybers, because it's such waffle. It's so meaningless.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the whole thing's bizarre. Let me just quote a bit of it. President Trump's actions, however, send a clear message. We will act to defend our interests in cyberspace, whether destroying online scammers' networks and seizing $15 billion of their stolen money, supporting a globe-spanning operation to obliterate Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Huh? It's a cyber strategy. Or leaving our adversaries blind and uncomprehending during a flawless military operation to bring international narco-terrorist Nicolas Maduro to justice. Adversaries are on notice that America's cyber operators and tools are the best in the world and can be swiftly and effectively deployed to defend America's interests. I mean, that's a hell of a strategy right there, don't you think, Adam?
I mean, I guess what I took away from this was, like, at least like the Five Eyes in the US in particular, like they know how to do offensive cyber, right? They're good at the technical part of that. Their OPSEC's great. We were just talking about their wonderful, you know, beautiful exploits. So obviously those were Australian exploits they bought off the shelf. But anyway, like,
Eyes... Enough of the media talking about how these were American exploits. They were Australian exploits. Thank you very much.
So like the US absolutely has amazing offensive capability. Defensive cyber, and especially doing defensive, you know, at a country scale, like trying to solve municipal water, SCADA, you know, vulnerabilities or whatever, that's hard. Just hacking stuff is easy, and the US knows how to do that. And this is just a case of, we've got a hammer, let's go find things to hit with it, because, you know, in the end, all of the other problems are really hard. And the Trump administration is not there for hard problems, right? It's there for quick wins and easy and, you know, things that they can make a splashy show of doing something about. And that's what offensive cyber is. Like, is it going to work? Yeah. Maybe a little, maybe against some people, who knows? And we haven't really tried it. I mean, like letting NSA, you know, uncaging that particular shark and letting it just go nom 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 over the internet, it might work. It's possible. I guess we're going to find out. I mean, I think
that's always the case with these Trump initiatives, right? Like even this Iran thing, it might work. But I would say there's a reason other people haven't tried it, right? Like now, have previous administrations been too cautious with offensive action? I think they have, right? So you're right. We're going to get to see. We're going to get to see what happens here. And I do think that the offensive actions against ransomware crews and ransomware as a service, I mean, that's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And I think that's largely because Five Eyes took their gloves off and just beat the crap out of them, right? So I think you can achieve certain aims, like data extortion is huge. Ransomware still exists, but doesn't feel like a existential crisis for us all anymore, and it did there for a while. So I think, you know, you can certainly achieve things with offensive action. But like, let me just quote one more line from the cybersecurity strategy, which is our resolve. This is the moving forward section. Our resolve is absolute. We will act swiftly, deliberately, and proactively to disable cyber threats to America. We will not confine our responses to the cyber realm. So, you know, gloves are well and truly coming off. Now, it looks like the White House has announced a thing where they're going to go after cyber scam compounds and look at actually setting up like a victims restitution fund. I don't know that that's the way to go, but I think it's beats doing nothing. And you contrast this with the cybersecurity strategy. I mean, this seems like it actually had a lot more thought go into it. James, what did you think of this one?
Yeah, real thought gone into it. You know, I think I raised the question of like, where's this funding going to come from, and to what scale? How is it going to be meted out? And at the end of the day,
it'll come from all the DOGE savings, man.
Well, yeah, hopefully the plan for this is on the thumb drive that we'll get to. But it's like, Yes, great. I mean, if I was a victim and this fund was being set up, I would be appreciative of it. But I don't think the government stepping in here and making a pool of money available to victims actually shifts the needle on fixing the problem, in the platforms and the systems that are enabling it. So good, but wrong spot, maybe?
Yeah, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think the article said that the money looks like it's going to come from stuff they've seized from, so it's like proceeds of crime. And I guess in that respect, that seems like a better use for it than just putting it in the general government pot. But, I also wonder, is there any weird incentives here? Like, if people can give their money to scammers and there's a chance they're going to get it back again, like, does that make them more prone to falling for scams? Like, kind of how cyber insurance makes people target people that have cyber insurance?
Well, if it's money seized from these scammers, is that all money seized from Americans, or are they taking money that was lost by Australians and giving it to Americans? Like, it's just strange. Like, I get it, right? Like, I think though the Brits, there's a report in Recorded Future where the Brits are thinking about this a little bit differently, which is like more about shifting the liabilities onto telcos and banks. And you might think, well, why telcos? And it's because a lot of this stuff happens over the phone, and the telcos should do a better job of blocking some of these scam call centers where they know where they are. You know what I mean? They're getting reports of this stuff and they're just operating on such thin margins that they don't want to spend the money to actually deal with it. I would say too that I did some Googling today, and the total amount of money lost by Australians in these sorts of scams in an annual period is something like $2 billion Australian dollars. And the Commonwealth Bank, which is just one of our big four banks, posted a profit of $10 billion. So I think if you want to get this stuff to stop, you do make the banks liable and it stops, basically is what I think. I mean, James, you actually worked at the Commonwealth Bank, but probably not on stuff like this. But, that sort of statement, like even that idea would be considered just the most unholy, satanic idea by Commonwealth Bank management, surely.
Yes. There's various people there that I'm sort of picturing their reactions now if I showed up and suggested that we do this. I think you and I were talking about this offline, and with the bank aspect came up. I think if I remember right, the UK article actually pitched it more at like get the telcos and the platforms involved. And I said to you, well, but what about the banks, right? Because I think we both agree that the buck stops with the payment processors. And we know this model works. When credit card companies take on the burden of all things fraud related and protect the customer, that's a proven model that works really well. And sure,
well, the reason there is a reason, which is the banks are in the UK are already under the hook, on the hook to a degree, right?
Yes,
so I think this is just an extension out to other players.
That's right. It's taking that same model and taking it to the next couple of layers up. But again, I think the right sort of incentive structures happen when you put this closest to where the money moves around. But we'll see. It's better than what we're seeing in other places. So all these things are like, okay, let's watch and see what works and extrapolate that out into other regions.
Moving on, and man, so many executive orders to talk about this week. And apparently, according to Axios, this is a bit of a scoop. The White House is readying a executive order to get Anthropic pulled out of every corner of the US government. I mean, this is just like, they're shooting themselves in the foot with this. It's insane. It's petty. I don't get it. James, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, I don't get it either. And with those quotes you were reading out of the strategy, like Grok wrote that. And if you don't think they did, like, convince me otherwise, right? It's straight out of an LLM, that sort of language. But the thing that irks me about this is it's this notion of, and I hate the term woke, but just it keeps coming up around, we're getting rid of Anthropic because it's too woke. I'm sorry, go fire up OpenAI, go fire up Llama or any other model, pitch them the same sort of question and watch which one of them is the most sycophantic and woke. And it's OpenAI every time in the current set of models. And it's largely anecdotal, but when you use these things day by day and you interact with them, Anthropic's the one that actually just gives you straight answers and doesn't sort of, fluff around and give you the, you're absolutely right sort of things. And so it's dumb on every level, and it's extra dumb because it's the best model out there and they're hell-bent on getting rid of it. So,
I mean, Adam, I got to ask you, if you're China watching this, there's that meme of like America saying, take that, China, and like blowing its head off with a rifle and China just standing there looking horrified. You know the meme? Like, this strikes me as one of those, right?
Yeah, it's dumb and it's petty and it's poorly thought out, and unfortunately that's a pattern that the Trump administration leads us to expect, like this sort of
Like America has built this
flailing.
incredible edge with Anthropic. It's such a wonderful story of American innovation, right? And they're good at innovation, right? And they've built this wonderful thing, and now the government's like, can't have that. What?
It makes no sense. It's such a self-own, and like, and the thing is, Anthropic knows that they're good, right? They know that they've got the best stuff. They are doing, their numbers are all looking great. Corporate's taking them up. Like, it's, they're doing well, and they just don't care. Like, if anything, the burden of not having to do business with the US government, I mean, think how much simpler your regulatory and like legal approvals department is going to be without having to do government contract approval. Like, I bet those guys are just laughing, like, when going off to the, have a beer to celebrate, not having to deal with Pentagon procurement. I mean,
well, the problem is, though, like being designated a supply chain risk. I mean, I think there's a bit of a legal argument back and forth, but I think, a lot of companies that might do business with the US government can no longer use it as well. Like, or that is what the government is claiming. So, it remains to be seen how badly this is going to harm Anthropic. But, all of these companies are basically just cash incinerators, right? So, like, bottom line difference, I don't really know if it makes much of a difference. It's just they're all in a race to see who can sell the most tokens. It's pretty funny. I saw some numbers going around on socials the other day. I don't know if they're true, but it's saying that like a $200 Claude Code subscription can burn up to $5,000 of compute every month, which is like the level to which this stuff is. I mean, this stuff is just subsidized to a degree that is like kind of crazy. And look, staying with Anthropic, they are launching a code review tool to check, funnily enough, to be able to review AI-generated code. So I love this. You create the problem, you create the solution. James, I mean, you're the guy who spends the most time with AI among the three of us. I think this is probably quite a positive development, actually.
Yeah, it's a positive development, but is it a standalone product that we should be sending a press release out about? No. Like, if anything, it sort of harks back beautifully to the Microsoft playbook of, we've created this product and it's got a whole bunch of security problems in it. But that's okay. This product over here fixes all those security problems and we'll sell you both. And it's two different licenses. Like, just bundle this into the way the thing works. It's generating the code, make sure it checks its work, make sure it's doing the code review itself, and the result is better anyway. So, Well,
I mean, Claude Code subscriptions eventually have to head to like $5,000 a month anyway, right? So you'd expect some bundling there.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. That's probably the upper bound. I don't know if everybody's generating that much, using that many tokens. But anyway, this whole thing, what a wild world. And I should mention too that we had a bit of a laugh about the fact that CrowdStrike's share price plunged because Anthropic, code security or whatever got released, and investors don't know much about cybersecurity, so they started selling CrowdStrike. They just posted a record quarter, okay? And it's like, what is it there? Total revenue grew 23% on a year-on-year basis to $1.31 billion in the quarter ended Jan 31. So congratulations to all of you CrowdStrikers on that. Just a funny thing. Now, Adam, you're our Java guy, man. You're our Java guy, and we've got a Java story here.
He gets to be the AI guy, and I'm stuck with being the Java guy. Like, do I look like I'm from the 90s? Oh, wait.
I mean, you do. Yes.
Yeah, fair call.
You are from the 90s, and you do love a bit of Java.
I do. I love it because it's so easy to break, and people who write Java code, for whatever reason, seem to write security critical trash, and this is a great example of security critical trash. This is a authentication library called Pack4j that, amongst other things, implements like JWT tokens for web authentication. So we do web app as authing requests is what it uses. JWTs are usually like a little JSON blob that are then signed with a signature. This particular piece of code, if the signature was null, it would just go, you know what, that's fine. We'll just trust the contents anyway. So you can make a token that says, yes, I'm totally admin, just not sign it, and it lets you in as admin. So good job, Java devs.
I mean, it's a decent, we talk about comedy bugs, but that's like, comedy masterclass bug. Yeah,
definitely comedy.
Pretty good. All right, so we're on the home stretch now, and we have seen a bunch of reports that Joshua Rudd, Lieutenant General, or whatever it is, he's been confirmed as the head of NSA and CyberCommand. So finally, after about a year or whatever it's been, there is now a new head of NSA and CyberCommand, so that's pretty good. Meanwhile, over at CISA, dude, I think I called it right when I've said that this is CISA's century of humiliation because, you know, we talked about their CIO going. We actually had this bizarre moment in our prep call between the three of us, plus Amberly was on the call as well this morning, where I'm like, oh, hang on, we've got an item here about CISA's CISO and deputy CISO leaving. We talked about that last week. It's like, no, last week it was the CIO. This week it's the CISO and deputy CISO. And now Sean Planky, who was going to be Trump's nominee to lead CISA, I mean, he got walked from his job at DHS. And like there's reporting that I think he was only came back as a nominee for a second time due to like a clerical error and stuff. And there's this whole background about how he's on the nose because of some DHS decision to not buy boats from some congressman's district. I mean, the whole thing is like the ultimate. It's not even a sandwich. It's so layered. It's more like a lasagna of American political dysfunction, just sort of squeezed into one. And here it is. But it doesn't look like he's going to be the guy, I think is the TLDR here.
You know, we don't really know much about the guy, but yeah, the bit with the Coast Guard part of it. And I think there was some reports that he'd been kind of when he was in the DHS, he was also rummaging around in CISA, like kind of on the assumption that he was going to end up in the role, and it did not seem that people there were enjoying that process. So
I did see those reports where he was like apparently annoying people, basically.
Yeah. So I imagine there'll be some degree of celebration at CISA over this, but you know, they haven't got a lot of good news to go around. So I guess even a little thing probably feels pretty big there.
Yeah, it's going to be a small party too because there's not many people left.
Well, everyone's still furloughed, I think. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's changed. But like, as I say, like CISA is unfortunately just, you know, you wouldn't really describe it as a functioning agency at the moment. Speaking of which, though, I did have dinner with Chris Krebs last week in Sydney. He was down at the same event that I was at, that Sphere event. That was fun too. There was a lot of cool people around. Got to catch up with some listeners, met some cool listeners. So thanks to all of you for saying hello. I did really enjoy that. But yeah, wow, what a world. Now, we did mention a DOGE thumb drive. James, you brought that one up. We got a story here, another one from Lorenzo that says that a DOGE employee apparently walked out two very tightly restricted databases from government systems and said, oh, these will be great at my next job. Now, whether or not this guy was just trolling or whether or not this has actually happened, kind of supports our argument at the time that all of this DOGE stuff that was happening, that perhaps there might be some data governance concerns, to say the least.
Yeah, that was a prediction that you made, and it seemed pretty accurate. You know, it never felt particularly good letting 4chan kids rummage around with root access to all of government things, and of course, this is how it ends up shaken out. And the thing that I found reading this story was, I saw the headline about Doge. I'm like, man, I haven't heard of Doge in ages. That seems like ancient history. And it was only last year.
Yeah, man.
But yet, like, so much has happened. And Doge just seems like a quaint sort of after, footnote at this point. So, I mean, good on Lorenzo for digging up a story that, I had already forgotten about. So, yeah, but yeah, exactly as we would expect, of course.
Yeah, I mean...
You have to laugh because otherwise you would weep.
Yeah, you really would. All right, so we're very much on the home stretch now. James, you added this one. This is a link from Palo Alto UDA42 looking at a vulnerability in Chrome that allowed extensions to do unholy things to Gemini.
Yeah, look, it's contrast this to me spending 80 minutes doing a solid podcast talking about the intricacies of what it takes to escape a sandbox from a browser. And then this is basically the browser's sandbox, but we jammed an agent that has full file system access right next to the DOM and the rendering engine. And it's like, well, why do you even bother sandboxing anymore? And it's just... It's such an inversion of the security paradigm where it's like decades of work went into securing the browser, and then we just throw an agent in there that has full access to everything. And of course, all the extensions can access that agent and give it prompts to do. It's just like, did no one walk down the hall and talk to the crafty security guy and say, hey, should we be worried about this? Is anything going on here?
I mean, this reminds me of like I saw a funny post somewhere saying, all these people are throwing like Claudebot into VMs. And they're like, yeah, that's great. Then they give it the credit card number. They give it access to the internet. They give it all their passwords. And they're like, oh no, something bad happened, but I'm running it in a VM. It's just, what?
Yeah. It's like you run it into VM. Good job. Okay, what's the first thing it asks you for? All the tokens that you've got on your local desktop machine, and you paste them in. It's like, okay, so the VM is giving you a different IP address at that point. Good job, pal. Well done.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to wrap it up now and just mention this story. This is one for the slide decks, right? It's unusual. Well, I guess through my career, it has been unusual previously to hear of entire businesses disappearing as a result of cyber attacks. But there's an extremely large Romanian meat processor called Alex One, and Catalan obviously dug this one up and put it in our Monday newsletter. They had a ransomware attack, and the costs for recovering from this have essentially driven them into insolvency. So they're going through some sort of restructure now. Just a good one for the slide decks, right? Because I know people are always looking for these sorts of things, and this one happened in Romania, so it's probably going to go a little bit under the radar. But this is a real big deal company, and people can take a look at that one in this week's show notes. But that is it for this week's show. Adam Boileau, James WIlson, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me to walk through all of that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pat. We will see you next week.
Yep, thanks, Pat. Looking forward to it.
That was Adam Boileau and James WIlson there with a check of the week's security news. And it is time for this week's sponsor interview now. And for this week's sponsor interview, I chatted with Tony De La Fuente, who is the founder of Prowler. And Prowler started off as purely just an open source cloud security scanner, I guess. You could use it to find misconfigurations. You could use it to actually do remediations as well. And you don't need to use the SaaS tool to do that. You could do that through the command line tool. It's just cool. It's very good. The open source version being free, a lot of people use it. Like, it's an extremely popular project. But obviously Prowler, now there's a pro version, which previously, it's just like a SaaS version of Prowler, I guess. You could actually spin it up yourself and kind of run the same thing as SaaS. So you can run it in a container or whatever, spin up a web server, and you've essentially got the SaaS version there yourself. Tony's finally at the point where there's going to be some features splitting off that are just paid, and an example here, and I'll drop you in here where he starts talking about this, but an example is SSO, right? So you can actually get SSO to work with open source Prowler, but it's a bit fiddly and you've got to go configure it yourself and whatnot. Whereas with the Prowler Pro, with the SaaS version, that's just, pointy clicky done. So I'll drop you in here where we talk about that, and that leads to a deeper conversation of, what the dev team at Prowler have been up to. Enjoy.
Yeah, that is normal stuff. Actually, in Prowler open source, you can configure that, but you have to configure it. In Prowler Cloud, it comes everything done for you, right?
Yeah. It's more pointy clicky, more
friendly.
That
is the basic thing that everybody puts, like paid only, but it's beyond that. So everything in a complex platform, you need to configure a lot of things. We have now, for example, attack path that requires more infrastructure, like GraphDB, etc. So we maintain everything, all that for our customers. That is probably not enough value for somebody that can do everything with their hands. But most of the organizations, any size, they don't care about what is underneath, right? You just want cloud security in place.
Yeah, you just want it to work. You want to put the credit card number in and make it work, right?
Exactly.
That's pretty much it.
You can go through your favorite marketplace or the credit card, and that's all. You get it.
Yeah, but I think importantly, right? Like, the checks in Prowler, they are remaining open source, right? Like, that is not it's not like you're charging for checks with these changes.
No. So our plan and the reality is that Prowler is the de facto tool for cloud security, and that is going to keep being exactly the same because it's our value, right? Creating new controls, new detections, remediations for cloud infrastructure, for infrastructure as code, for Kubernetes, SaaS providers as well, the most common SaaS providers for infrastructure, let's say the Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, even GitHub, etc., GitLab that we are adding now. All that stuff, the Prowler universe is accessible for everybody, including the AI, right? Or third parties AI.
Well, funnily enough, because you and I were chatting before we got recording, and funnily enough, you told me that when that people are asking Claude Code, hey, like, can you check my cloud infrastructure and make sure like nothing's accidentally exposed or misconfigured? And basically Claude goes around and tries to take a stab at it itself, and eventually it downloads Prowler, spins it up in a container, and off it goes, and it just like uses Prowler and gives you the results, right?
Yeah, when it goes to a dead end, it says, okay, let me use Prowler.
Yeah, that's awesome. But I mean, I guess that's handy, right? To be able to get Claude Code to use Prowler. But when you ask it to do something like compliance reporting, I'm not going to trust a non-deterministic large language model to do my compliance reporting based on using an open source tool in an unsanctioned way. Like, so I'm guessing you've still got like a bit of a moat, right, with some of these enterprise features that you're baking into the products. I mean, that must be part of the thinking here.
So part of our mapping, the mapping between controls and requirements of an integration platform, that is totally accessible. It's part of Prowler Hub, for example. But we want to offer the part of the infrastructure like SOC 2 Type 2 support, the multi-tenancy backup, all that stuff that you need to have if you want to go into compliance. That is going to be part of the paid only, of course.
Yeah.
Prowler
Cloud
Pro or Prowler Cloud Enterprise.
Now, I should mention too that, you know, people who want to actually use Prowler Pro, like, it is not difficult. If you just grab a credit card, and you can actually just head over to, you know, Prowler's website and, you know, click on pricing, and then off you go. You could get going with this extremely easily. Or if you are really stingy, you could just go to GitHub and grab the free version and do what you need to do. But one thing that's been interesting for you, right, is with the AI stuff, it's not so much that you guys are like squeezing heaps. I mean, there's a bit of AI. You've sprinkled some AI on Prowler, right? But it's not like an AI first kind of product. But what is interesting is people are building an awful lot of AI related infrastructure, right? You've had to build checks for that stuff. Like, what sort of infrastructure are we talking about there? Is it, I mean, you know, I'm not super au fait with the AI infrastructure, but I know that, you know, model context servers are a thing, MCP servers are a thing, but like what else is involved? And how easy is it to configure this stuff in a way that's not dangerous?
Well, so not using AI in a world of open source is a nonsense, right? So of course we use with Prowler Studio, you can create new detections, remediations, and new providers. Actually, we have customers that they create their own providers to scan new providers with Prowler, their own providers, like whatever they want to use Prowler. So all that stuff is doable in matter of hours. To give you an idea.
Well, yeah, you've got rid of that part of these sort of products where you have to be proficient in some indecipherable query language and you know, scripting language for writing the tools. You can do that with AI now. You know, that is
exactly. So for example, we added Vercel support in 2 hours. For example, so now you can, because Vercel is a key part of, you know, cloud infrastructure at the end of the day, right? So and also adding a chatbot, adding an MCP as a part of our set of tools when it comes to using findings or using Prowler in many different ways is key. So all that stuff is available around your findings, around your remediation plans, etc.
I guess my question was more about like what sort of infrastructure people are spinning up, you know, to host their own agents and whatnot. And, you know, is that turning into a popular thing for people to use Prowler to check, right? That sort of infrastructure.
You mean in AWS Bedrock or Vertex, etc.? So
yes.
So we see that happening every day when it comes to building their own models or their own AI in their workloads. So, but sometimes it's like you know, everybody goes very very fast building everything. So people is missing the security part of those services as well. Like,
well, I guess that was part of the question, right? Which is like, how are people doing with that, right? Because we've got this entirely new type of cloud computing environment that people are not experienced in setting up. Are they making mistakes? And is Prowler finding like a lot of misconfigurations and stuff in that area?
Yeah, 100%. Prowler, the good thing is that Prowler always finds a lot of misconfigurations. So the new software development lifecycle is, you build something and you put something somewhere, right? And that where is cloud. And that cloud can be infrastructure as service, like major cloud providers, or even places like Cloudflare or like Vercel or like many others that they need security as well. They need compliance as well. They need to make sure you are using the best practices to prevent from DDoS attacks to SQL injection. So because of course now cloud code security is going to take care of the security of your things, but can you 100% trust of everything that is being given in a prompt from a prompt? We will see. I think rule-based security is still a thing. At the end of the day, AI goes through checklists in order to give you a response. So that is
I think at the end of the day, having stuff like Claude Code actually use existing tools like Prowler is what's going to make a lot of sense, and when you hear people, the buzzword at the moment is, systems of record. They're going to need to use systems of record and whatever. It's like, yeah, it's pretty funny. As in, we're just going to need the same old products, but just with agents doing more to interact with them. What's the plan in terms of timing? Because this hasn't happened yet, right? So these versions are upcoming. Is it a gradual rollout of different versions, or are you just going to bang do an update real soon?
We are releasing this week before RSA a couple of features like the provisioning, bulk provisioning with Prowler Cloud, also the import findings from the CLI. So we are making the CLI, of course, is the scanner, but also the CLI is also a client of Prowler Cloud, in order to make easier the integration from CI/CD pipelines into cloud for compliance, AI, etc. So that is coming before RSA, and during RSA and after, we are rolling over more features that are going to enhance the experience of our customers.
Yeah, and I'll just say for the umpteenth time, I love it that you have a command line, version of Prowler. It makes a lot of sense, especially for people who want to give Prowler the sort of privileges that it needs to do remediations. Like, I totally understand why people don't want to cut and paste that into a web service, into SaaS. Like, that seems insane to me. So yeah, being able to do that in a CLI, and then also being able to do scans from the CLI and then import that into the SaaS so that you can do things like generate compliance reports and whatever, that makes a lot of sense. And it's also the sort of thing that absolutely does not belong in a free and open source repository. So it makes a lot of sense to me. Tony De La Fuente, thank you so much for joining me as always to talk all things Prowler. It's always very interesting.
Thank you, Pat.
That was Tony De La Fuente from Prowler there. And Prowler is a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. And you can just go to their website and drop in a credit card and, use it. Pretty straightforward. Or you could go to GitHub, grab the free version, and just off you go. Important thing that he noted there too, which is Prowler's checks. All of that's open source. That's not going to go behind any sort of, payment system or payment plan or anything like that. But yeah, it's good stuff. Prowler's cool. That's it for this week's show, though, and I do hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back soon with more security news and analysis. But until then, I've been Patrick Gray. Thanks for listening.